Hi, good afternoon. Please be seated. We are about to have our next session. My name is Sharon Bush. I'm from the UN Department of Public Information. We're at the SDG Media Zone live at the UN General Assembly. I am pleased to introduce a session, Achieving Zero Hunger. We have Peter Yo here, who will be introducing the speakers as well as leading on the discussion. Thank you so very much.
Thank you all, and I'm Peter Yo. I'm with the United Nations Foundation, which is an American organization and a global organization that works to promote a stronger relationship between the U.S. and the United Nations. And we are really pleased to be part of today's panel to talk about the issue of zero hunger and SDG 2. To have this discussion today, we have three very important guests. We have Maria Helena Semedo. She's the Deputy Director General of the Food and Agriculture Organization. That's the UN specialized UN agency that works to lead global efforts to end hunger. And then we have Rod Brooks, who is the CEO of Rise Against Hunger, which is an international humanitarian food agency. And then finally, we have Ankit Quatra, who's a young leader for the Sustainable Development Goals, chosen by the United Nations, as well as the founder of Feeding India. These are three leaders that bring very different perspectives to the issue of ending hunger. So to start us off, what I'd like to ask is, from your perspective, give us a snapshot about where we are in terms of the food and hunger situation in the world today. Maria Helena, may I ask you to start off?
Okay, thank you, Peter. Good afternoon, all. I would wish to start with a very good news, but unfortunately, I will share with you the last figures or findings of this publication. It was issued last Friday, the State of Food Security and Nutrition in the World, where the figures regarding 2016 show that after a trend of decreasing on food insecurity and nutrition, in 2016, we have 38 additional people suffering from hunger and malnutrition, from 777 million to 815 million. I believe they are not good news, but we have been doing very well. And because of this figure, I think is a wake-up call to all of us that we have done well. We cannot continue or be frustrated and do different. It's showing that we need to do different. We have to work more together, and business as usual is no longer the solution. I can speak on the drivers, but maybe we can talk later.
Great. Awesome. Thank you.
Okay.
Rod, why don't you give us your perspective? Thank you.
I would, and I so appreciate the Deputy Director's comments. The report that the FAO just released indicating that there are 38 million more hungry people in the world is certainly disheartening and sad for us to think about. And while this does serve, I think, as a call to action, I also think it's important, though, that we not lose sight of the fact that we are making significant progress, that for the last 2 decades, we have made significant progress in the fight to end hunger. We've seen, as a percentage of the world's population, the number of malnourished and hungry people around the world decrease from 33% roughly to about 11%. And so that represents tremendous progress. So while the report recently released is disheartening, and I think is a call to action for us to take action, it's important to emphasize that ending hunger is possible. And we are united around SDG number 2 to end hunger by 2030, and that by working together, we can make that happen.
Great, thank you. Ankit, you particularly focus on India, but give us your perspective about where we are.
Well, sure. I think I agree with what was just said here. I used to be in management consulting some time back, and I left my job to start ending hunger. I believe that we can end hunger, given the kind of intellect, talent, and technology we have in today's century. Serving food to everyone across the globe should not be a challenge. But I think while we're making tremendous growth, there's a new sort of challenges which keep coming up. For instance, now conflict in a lot of countries is giving rise to a lot of unpredictable hunger. And while we're doing a great job in terms of focusing on undernutrition, there is a greater responsibility we have in terms of looking at climate change and conflict war zones. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And you raise an interesting issue, which is what's driving hunger? And in particular, you mentioned conflict. Could you address this issue from your perspective as to what's the driver in hunger? Is it the lack of food worldwide, or is it conflict and other types of issues? Love your perspective.
Our analysis from the report, we have three main drivers. The first one, as it has been mentioned, is conflict. The second one is climate change, both affecting the availability of food. Because we are conflict, we have less people producing, or if the food is available, we need to have some corridors to transport the food. The second one, as I said, is climate change. We have, through El Niño, more drought or more floods affecting the production of food. And the third element is the slowdown in some economic growth, because we could see in the last years that some countries or some region, there is decreasing the economic growth what we had in the last 10 years. All of those elements together are affecting what I have mentioned, the number of people suffering from food insecurity. When you mention particularly the conflict, is not only the conflict causing the availability of food, but I think we need to have peaceful societies, we need to have a different approach. When we have conflict, we cannot have only a short-term or a humanitarian approach where we save lives, we give food. We need to have a long-term approach. Otherwise, it will happen what has happened today. We make efforts, we grow, and then we step back. And the third one is how we can have more economic growth, but economic growth bringing equality, because inequality has been another point as a consequence of some economic growth. We grow, but we increase inequality. Those are all the points we need to address in order to really eradicate hunger by 2030, what is our main goal.
Great, thank you. And you're raising an issue which is, what can we do over the long term to deal with food insecurity, to deal with hunger? So Rod and Ankit, could you tell us a little bit about what your perspective is on what are the solutions? What should we be looking at that are groundbreaking or different to really move the needle on this issue?
Sure. Well, I certainly agree with the factors that we've been speaking about: climate change, economic growth, et cetera. I think there's another challenge, though, that has inhibited our ability to end hunger, and that is apathy. Folks' lack of awareness, or perhaps lack of belief that we can actually end hunger. And so Rise Against Hunger, while working to address and end hunger directly in the communities that we serve, has also very much been working to create a movement around the notion of ending hunger and getting people directly involved. I do have just a few slides here. We know that one of the most strategic ways to go about ending hunger has been through school feeding programs. We know that when school feeding programs are established, we provide the nutrition that enables children to learn. We find that those meals provide an incentive for parents to send their kids to school. As often we see when we establish school feeding programs, we see school enrollment double, triple, quadruple. So working with this strategy in mind, about 11 years ago, Rise Against Hunger initiated a meal packaging program that is designed to both address apathy as well as to provide meals to support school feeding programs. Our meal packaging program has so far, through this program, we've packaged more than 300 million meals. And it's through meal packaging events like these where volunteers are involved in a very hands-on way, packaging high-protein dehydrated meals that we use to distribute to partners in more than 40 countries. We've also established this meal packaging program in 5 other countries outside the U.S., so we're sourcing materials locally and involving local folks. The impact that you see here, again, is that through these meals, we can provide the nutrition that children need to learn and encourage school enrollment. And it's through this that we can begin to break the cycle of poverty and hunger. You know, I heard a school principal in Kenya summarize it best. He said that without the meals, children don't come to school. If they don't come to school, there's no education. If there's no education, there's no hope for transformation and change. So the meals that we can provide through school feeding programs are truly hope.
Great, thank you. And as a father myself, I know that the concept that my kids would learn if they have not been fed is non-existent. So it's an absolute element of making sure the kids are educated, just make sure they're fed, because otherwise they're not going to pay attention and they won't have the capacity to learn effectively. Ankit, what's your perspective about solutions that could really be game changers?
Sure. So I think I completely agree with what you just said. And at Feeding India, we too, there's a greater task in terms of building a community regarding, in a sense of ownership, regarding solving the problem and not just, promoting organizations which are, solving the agenda. But I believe that, there's a greater opportunity to use technology to solve the problem. Take for instance the million Rohingya refugees which are in Bangladesh right now, and the severe food insecurity crisis they have, which is just an urgent response required. If we had clear data regarding the excess food in a neighboring country like India, which is usually to the tunes of millions of dollars, this food could have been rescued and donated to those people who serve for a minimum of a year. But the lack of that technology right now, or harnessing that data and transparently displaying that and using that to solve the problem, is I think what's missing and what's next.
And as we think about what's next, we have till 2030 to get to zero hunger. And so is it possible to get to zero hunger? What should we be looking for 5 and 10 years from now that will, from our perspective, say we're actually getting to that point? What is your perspective?
I believe that we can achieve zero hunger in our generation. And I think this was the objective when it was launched some years ago. And we have some good examples. In Latin America, if you see the figures, in Latin America, food insecurity is decreasing. What is happening in Latin America? First, they have a political will. The government is committed to eradicate hunger. They have a global program called Latin America Sin Hambre, Latin America Without Hunger. It's a regional program with country perspective. And the implementation of this program is not only in the government hands. As we all talk here, is the government, is the civil society, the youth, women, all the society together. Is a fight, is a responsibility of the society to eradicate hunger. And from that, we need appropriate policies, we need investment, and we need to work together. As I said at the beginning, we need to find new ways of working together, not going business as usual. It's not saying that business as usual is not the solution. We really need to move towards a business as usual or not business as usual solution. And this is what we have to do, and we need to work together towards the same goal, which is eradicating hunger.
Great, thank you. Ankit and Rod, this is lightning round here. 30 seconds each. Can we get to zero hunger by 2030?
I think absolutely yes. And in fact, I'm pleased to announce that a campaign that Rise Against Hunger is launching imminently is called This Is Possible. What we want to do is to show through specific examples of progress being made toward ending hunger that ending hunger is possible. And we want to offer this as a platform to any organization that's making progress towards ending hunger. So that is a platform we can all speak to. That we have to work collaboratively, we have to work together. There are roles that all of us can play. There are companies like Kraft Heinz, for example, that we're partnering with that are providing micronutrients to support our meals around the world. So taking a holistic approach, absolutely we can end hunger.
Great. Final word, Ankit, over to you.
Well, absolutely. I think I started by saying that hunger can absolutely be ended. And it's, there's a thin line of difference between optimism and false hope. And, it's not like we don't have enough food to feed the world right now. We have much more than we need. In fact, we waste 40% of the food produced in the world today. So it's more about just using food judiciously and getting, people from all walks of life together, including organizations and individuals, to contribute towards the agenda. Yeah.
Great. Well, Anki Quatra, Rod Brooks, Maria Helena Semedo, we really appreciate your participating today. We appreciate your thoughts and insight, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.